Well, hello everyone. Just a little heads up. We're going to be talking about a subject that is absolutely massive in many ways. And we did ponder in there before, but we're going to have another little go dipping our toes in that ocean again. We're talking about grief and the different aspects of it, because it's not all just one thing. We grieve over many things. And we don't often realize that that's actually what's happening when we're eliciting things like anger and upset and frustration in situations. It could well be because we're grieving something. We're missing someone, or there's a change that's happening. And you might realize what's happened before, but there's something about this change that feels like you lost something, or it's not quite right. So we'll go into the introductions and then we will begin. So let's start with Willie, since Tony's just taken a big glug.
I'm Willie Nicol, the cop turned coach and owner of Willie Nicol Coaching. I'm a personal development and mindset change coach. After a 31-year career in police, 7 years in corporate security, and decided to get out of the rat race and work for myself. So I help people who are struggling with things in their life and can't see a way out of it. So they come to me to help with solutions because I don't suggest or advise. I just facilitate an environment where they come up with their own solutions, because my experience is that solutions are all inside us.
Okay. Isabel.
I'm Isabel Lochart and I am a Reiki and shamanic practitioner, but I am also a family celebrant. So I meet with a lot of families who have been bereaved to organise funerals. But I'm a bereaved mum. It will be 4 years tomorrow since my son suddenly died. A lot of people might think, oh, it's coming up to four years. She'll be over it by now. You don't get over grief. You learn to carry it.
Thanks. Tony.
Hi, thanks, Leslie. I'm Tony from Change Your Mind Limited. I'm a mindset coach and hypnotherapist. I work with business leaders who face difficult or tough decisions every day, possibly hiring new staff, allocating resources, launching new products. Whatever it is, all the decisions impact on their business. So I work with them to actually make them more confident in making the decision making, to get more clarity and direction in their life. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela from Inner Pathways, and I love to help people get to a point where they're living their life in their way and on their terms, whatever that may be, helping people get off that hamster wheel where life is just the same every day and they're not really sure that they're really truly living. So whatever's going on for people, whether it's stuff that they've got to deal with or just too much baggage that they just don't know how to put down, that's my happy place, using kinesiology and a number of other modalities, depending on what the client needs at that exact moment in time to help them be who they want to be.
And I'm Leslie Marsh. I'm also a shamanic practitioner and storyteller and teacher. It's an interesting way of being. It's a modality of healing, and it's all about the energy. I'm also an NLP practitioner and Erickson hypnotherapist. So there's a lot about change. There's a lot about understanding what's going on in the world that is you, the client themselves, or us, the healers. And basically what we're all doing is healing something. And the healing comes in many different ways for many different reasons. Isabel mentioned one area of grief, which is bereavement. Being bereft is missing something, something has left, something has departed, or someone has departed. And for many people, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's been a human being. It can be part of their life. If someone loses their sight, they can be bereft of that ability. If someone loses a limb, they can grieve because of that. And it causes a lot of pain. any way you slice it. So in our work as healers, as therapists, Angela, what would you say you would be looking at for someone who comes to you who doesn't realize they're still grieving?
I don't know if I was looking at it for anything in particular. I think I'd be looking at, as I do with most things, looking at the person as a whole to understand what's going on. For a lot of people, any kind of change can bring out grief symptoms. And it's about being able to understand where you're at right now and understand where it is you want to get to, and then see if that's possible.
Like Isabel said, Tony, there's the way that grief works is it's like stumbling around in an attic sometime when the lights are out and you bump over it, into it, or it falls down on top of you and hits you very hard, unexpectedly. Does this happen with your work?
Yeah, I think what Isabel was talking about, and one, I just want to say that thank you, Isabel, for actually speaking about that, because it can't be easy even talking about it here, and it will help other people just listening to you. And I think I call it an emotional roller coaster, because I think that's what people go through. It's like Isabel said, you can be up quite a bit and people think everything's okay. They sort of go over it, and suddenly it could be a song, it can be something they've picked up in the house. I've got an example is my dad. My dad walks with the house and he says that, I asked him, what are you doing? I don't remember. I come over to look for something and I saw a picture of your mum. My mum died 3 years ago from COVID. And he'll find something with us, and suddenly he goes into this little world. And the world he goes into is just all memories. And that's what I find with a lot of people in it, is it's the memories of them that take over. And they can be really good memories, but they can still hit people in different ways. And as you've said earlier, remember, grief is not only about losing like something like that. Sometimes it can be trauma causes grief as well for people, or grief can become the trauma.
Willie?
Sorry for my departure there. The first time I experienced grief in a big way was when my father passed away. And I'm horrified to realise it's nearly 40 years ago. And I was obviously a much younger man. And to cut a long story short, anger was my default emotion. Because I was a young police officer dealing with some unsavoury people, and I wondered a bit illogically why my father had been taken, who was a nice guy, and all these other horrible people hadn't. Illogical, but understandable, I think. And I was talking to a young man earlier today. I went for hypnotherapy, which I poo-pooed as humble jumble. But my doctor, a very wise lady, suggested it, and it made a huge difference to me. And I lost that anger, or overcame it, or got rid of it. That's one element, as Tony said, of grief, is you lose someone dear to you. But I could also grieve for my lost youth, or opportunities that I didn't take or should have taken. So grief doesn't necessarily relate to bereavement. It can be on a lot of other levels. And it's how we manage, cope, deal with that emotion, because it is an emotion, will determine whether it stays with us or whether we, as Isabel says, we learn to live with it.
It's fundamentally about attachment, the attachment to a person, a way of life thing.
Concept,
yeah. The idea of something, because we have these ideas of how things should be, how they could be, how we want them to be. And suddenly one day we kind of fall over that little cliff of, I don't think so. And then we wonder when we're free falling, where did it all go? So there are, like Willie says, layers of grief and different aspects of it. It's very multi-aspected, particularly just now. We're still getting over the idea that, we're grieving the idea of normal and normality, because we've suddenly realised that it was never really there. It's a concept that is subjective to everyone. When it comes to dealing with clients, though, we have to always look at and listen to what their needs are, because whatever we think I know of someone who has had miscarriages, and the way that that is treated in hospitals, etc., by the profession is very much get over it. It was nothing. It's done. But actually, she informed me that she can feel, and I've heard it from other people, she can feel where those babies were in her uterus. She can still feel where they were. And she grieves for them continually. To the extent that
I would like to point out, I think that has changed. I think, or it's in the process of changing. I don't think it's quite as harsh of you've had a miscarriage, get over it now. At least I hope not. But I think there has been a lot more recently to focus on that topic.
Yeah, the other part of it is, how long is it okay to grieve? Because a lot of people think, well, it's been so long. I mean, Isabel, you'll probably realise this as well. It's been that long. You've got to, get over it. It's done. You've grieved long enough. And to say that to someone is possibly just an ugly thing to do, because it's not your grief, but it's basically the other person who can't handle it, maybe. What do you think, Isabel?
It is so true. People find it hard to hold space for people who are in pain. So they either disappear out of your life, or they, like hugging, that's one thing. That's not to give you comfort. It's like, I can't cope with you grieving, so I am going to hug you to make you stop crying, because then I will feel better. But the grief it's really complex. So Ben died really suddenly one Sunday afternoon. So I had to cope with Ben dying, and note that I use the words death, dying, dead. I don't use passed away. I don't use went over the rainbow bridge. And I'm going to tell you a story here. So I became friends with Ben's best friend, Fraser, who works for an IT company. And during lockdown, one of his colleagues died really suddenly. We'll call him Bob. I can't actually remember what his name was. So Fraser had to do a site visit of what would have been one of Bob's customers. And he got there and were, oh, where's Bob? And Fraser said, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you don't know, Bob died. And the guy at this company said, well, that's a bit brutal, isn't it? And Fraser was, I'm sorry, what do you mean? Well, the language you've just used, that's a bit brutal. Said, you should have said passed away. And Fraser was a bit like, but he died. That guy actually put in a complaint because Fraser had used the correct terminology, Bob died. We have become so frightened to even use the word dead or died. And we need to reclaim that. When people say to me, I'm sorry you lost your son, I'd say, like, well, I was kind of careless of me, wasn't it? I lost him. And they'd look at me and say, I didn't lose him, he died. It is a loss in my life, but Ben died. Because whatever terminology you use doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't lessen the grief any. It doesn't make me feel any better, whatever terminology you use. But we need to reclaim the word death. There's an amazing woman called Dr. Catherine Mannix, and she was a palliative care consultant. And I'll find a link to it. She did a short, I think it was a YouTube video, and it was about reclaiming the word death, because we're born, we live, we die. We don't use any other words for being born. We don't use any other words for living. So why do we use it for death? But with Ben,
we do have death doulas now that help us to actually approach it in different ways.
Yeah, I started training as a death doula, but then I realised that wasn't the path I wanted to go on. And death doulas do an absolutely phenomenal job. I'm friends with quite a few of them.
Yeah, it's basically taking the fear away from the idea of dying, of passing over, of doing whatever it is that how people are comfortable in saying it, but it actually allows them to see the whole process and be there for the process, which is very much sanitized now and has been taken away from us. I mean, when we see the way that they do things in India.
Yeah, but when somebody dies, it's not just I'm not just grieving Ben's death, I'm grieving that future. I grieve seeing his cats, because when he died, his ex-girlfriend took the cats. I miss those cats desperately. I still love going down and not just seeing him, but seeing the cats. And it's all of that things that are woven together that you miss. So it's not. I miss his smell. I miss his voice. I miss his really wicked sense of humor. I miss the hugs. I miss getting excited when he came to visit me, standing at my living room window waiting for his car to come up the drive. I miss all that kind of things. And here I am, welling up again. So grief is really, really complex. And in the West, we are so bad at speaking about death. We are so bad at supporting people who are grieving because we just don't know what to do. When my husband went down to the pub a good few weeks after Ben died, and people were asking how I was, and he said, well, why don't you go and visit her? Oh, we don't know what to say. And he said, well, say that. You know, she's not expecting you to come and, you know, come and magically make her feel better, but just go and visit her. But nobody ever did. I had one friend that helped me, who held space, who made sure that I got out once a week until lockdown hit, and that was my support mechanism. Goes, and Willie, you know how grief can affect me, and it can affect me suddenly. I was driving home from the supermarket one day and it hit me like that, but all the way home I had a voice in my head saying, contact Willie, contact Willie, contact Willie. So I did. And that's something hard for somebody who is grieving. Whatever they are grieving, is to actually ask for help. You know you need help, you don't know who to ask, and sometimes when you ask somebody who said, I'm here for you, babe, and you ask them, oh, I'm a bit busy.
I think the West of Scotland particularly were very reticent about approaching someone who has been bereaved or is suffering from grief, because we don't know what to say. You're quite right, Isabel.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know the words. We're frightened we make a mess of it, that we somehow make the matter worse. So we do the avoidance tactic. Let's not bother trying, right? As you say, if someone just come up and say, hello, that's it. Be there. Don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything, right? Be there and listen. And as you say, hold the space. Talking of miscarriages, my first wife had a miscarriage. We had been together, we'd been married for 10 years. It was never going to happen, we didn't think. Then, blow me, in her late 30s, my wife, I came in from work and she handed me a whiskey and said, sit down. And I thought, my goodness, someone is ill or has died. She said, no, I'm pregnant. And I can't repeat what I said at that point, but I was excited. After all this time, we're in our late 30s. My wife was actually a year older than me, so she was pushing 40, and I thought, oh my goodness. Anyway, time went on and had a scan and everything's great. And all of a sudden, one day at work, I got that call that she'd had a miscarriage. And I was a detective at the time, and we're kind of stony-faced detectives. And everyone asked me, how's your wife doing? Is your wife okay? What's your wife up to? No one asked me. At the time, I actually wasn't overly bothered. I was actually curious. No one asked me how I was doing, how I was feeling having lost a child, or potentially lost a child, because it was assumed that that men didn't have to deal with that in a way that required support or help. And I don't know, Tony, if this is your experience. Men go to a funeral and there's a manly handshake and perhaps a pat on the shoulder, right? And that's it. So I think in the West of Scotland, we're not very good at dealing with it. We don't know how to approach it. And all I would suggest is that just go and say hello.
And you're right, because you've been at the funeral and people come up to you. They don't, a lot of guys come up, they don't even say a word. They actually shake your hand, tap you right, but they'll walk away. They don't actually even say, just to say, like, sorry, I'm glad, whatever you're feeling, whatever, anything. Hello, catch me up later or something. But I want to say something that what Isabel said that really got me with something that's like, The people that say I'll be there for you, and yet are never there. That's the thing that really does annoy me for other people. I've had a few clients lately with that someone's told them, someone close to them, because they lost one of them similar to talking about was it was a miscarriage, and she's pregnant again, really worried. And a friend says, look, if you need somebody to talk to, I'll be there. So she phoned up last Saturday, no, week before, Saturday night. It was about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, wasn't it late? But I'm out there now, so can I call you back in the morning? And she said it was totally devastating for her because she's all alone, sitting there, she's got nobody else to contact. And yet the one person that told her, I will be there for you whenever you need me, just call, and everyone wasn't even there. And I always say to people, please don't say that to somebody, especially someone that's going through anything like or going through grief. If you really cannot be there, just tell them the truth. Tell them you can't be there all the time, but if you are able, you'll be there. Because I think that's something that really bothers. But the other thing for me is that grief doesn't hit everybody straight away. I said to you about my mum, she died 3 years ago. And I've always been known as the stony, I was like a bit like Willie, I'm back from my forces back in security and everything. I've always been told stony faced. And the people said, oh, it's just the way he's dealing with it. But I didn't know, and it's just because something's coming up this week, until 2 days ago, that grief actually hit me in the middle of my kitchen. And suddenly we talked about something else, and my mum came up into it. And I was annoyed at my dad because he keeps bringing it up, because he didn't realise I've never grieved. And I never really realised I hadn't done it properly, because you worry about everybody else. And it's only suddenly, this is 3 years later, it's 3 years next month, that actually hit me. And it's only because someone I'm going tomorrow, that if it wasn't happening this week, it probably wouldn't have done it then. It may have done it later. But that's one thing for people to realise, that grief does not hit everybody straight away. It can hit at any time, and you never know when it's going to be.
It can be quite
I've got
devastating.
loads of things I want to kind of cover. Sorry, Leslie. Interestingly, Tony, you said I didn't grieve properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does properly mean? And Willie, you were saying about people who say that they're going to be there for you, and Isabel, you were saying the same as well. What I found interesting as well, when someone gets a terminal diagnosis, the same thing happens. They've not gone yet. So I had a conversation with my aunt not long before she did die, and the conversation was on the lines of, people are crossing the road to avoid me because they don't know what to say to me. And all I want to do is say hello. And I think, Tony, you mentioned there about the funerals and just the handshake or the smile or the pat in the back. Maybe that's all they can give. And actually the person receiving it, do you want another person saying, I'm sorry, what are you sorry for? So I think it's an interesting one, that actually there's two sides to that one. And I don't think it's always necessary to say something. The fact that you've shown yourself to be there to give that person a hug. And interestingly, at a funeral 2 weeks ago, we went down the line as you leave the crematorium, and the person whose funeral it was, her grandchildren were in the lineup, and they were, I think they're late teens. And I got to a couple of them, and it was a case of, do you want a hug? And their mum said to me, we were the last ones out at the crematorium. Their mum said to me, you're the first person to actually ask that.
Mm.
Everybody else either chose for them that they were getting a hug or they weren't. And that stuck with me as well, as to maybe not everyone wants a hug. And Isabel, you're saying that, are people giving hugs just to shut you up?
Yeah.
So
I
there's lots
always
of different
ask-
bits in there.
But also,
I
I
always
think it's a
ask
case of,
people if they want a hug, always.
I think it's always a case as well, also a case that the person giving the hug, that's what they need.
Possibly.
That's an individual need. And there's so many different ways of being at this stage of the game of life. I used to work for a Jewish guy, and his mother died. So I asked, what is the protocol here? What am I supposed to do? Do I send flowers? No, you don't send flowers. Well, what do I do? Well, they sit Shiva. So what's Shiva? So it's 7 nights and 7 days. They have to sit on these little stools, and people go trailing past them. And I said, so what do I say? Is there a special thing I say? Am I supposed to say something? Just, I'm sorry for your loss, and walk on. That's enough. Okay, fine. So it's one of those things that some people like flowers. And when it comes to diagnoses, that was one of the things that I took charge of myself when I was diagnosed with cancer. And I knew it was coming, the diagnosis. I'd already decided that I'd diagnosed myself. And I'd said to, when we got the phone call, I said to Andrew, brace yourself, because this isn't going to be good. But when we got in there and we discussed the things with the doctors, who were quite unsure about why the patient was doing all the kind of, what is this? Why is it there? What are the odds? How do I deal with this now? Instead of trying and being fearful and doing the whole I'm in tears thing. It was a case of, I decided that I wasn't going to tell anyone who was going to have me in a wooden suit before I'd finished the sentence. So I only told the people who really needed to know.
I'm sorry that I didn't know that about you, Leslie. My sister died of cancer at the age of 40. I'll never forget coming back from holiday, phoning my mother up, saying, "Hi mum, how's things? You need to phone your sister." Aye, just phone your sister. And she told me over the phone. And so, as we do in the West of Scotland, we went to the pub.
Yep.
Because you wanted to get out of the house and whatever. That was the last time she actually went out socialising. And as Angela alluded to, you know this is going to end. So you kind of start your grieving kind of earlier, knowing how it's going to end. And the remarkable thing I remember with my sister and also my uncle and my first wife's father died of cancer was how stoic they were, and we were all in bits. My sister would always ask me, "How are you doing? You look tired. You needn't come to see me every night," because I did. And she was more concerned about my well-being than her own, which I found extraordinary. Perhaps it's approaching that time where you just say, "Right, that's that." But the anticipation of your sister, your young sister, and I was very fond of my young sister, not being there. Almost 6 months to the day she died. But bearing in mind what I'd gone through when my dad died, I thought, I'm not going to go down that road again. I'm going to be thankful for all the laughs we had, all the times we went for a drink, the dancing, the whatever it was. And that's how I not overcame it, but that's how I kind of reconcile myself to the fact that I have all these memories, and it was mentioned earlier, memories of all the good times. And sometimes it's very difficult to focus on them to the exclusion of the pain you're feeling. And let's not beat about the bush. It's pain. It's not like you stubbing your toe or knocking your funny bone off the wall, as sometimes happens to me because it's bloody sore. But there is pain. Right? And how we deal with that pain and these memories, good and bad, will determine how we end up feeling. So that's for me, the $64,000 question.
Yeah, when my brother was killed in an accident, he was only 26. And we just spent 3 weeks together. For some reason, the two of us got drunk at New Year, which you kind of do anyway. But we were marginally estranged because he was brought up as my nephew. But we shared a bottle of whiskey and made this promise that we were going to go on holidays together. We were going to spend 3 weeks, and we were going to go to Glastonbury, and we were going to get there via the New Forest, and we were going to do all this stuff. And we did, and it was great. And all the way through, I had this amazing urge to tell him that he was actually my little brother, but it wasn't my secret to tell. And when he did die, and he was lying in state kind of thing, as they do, and they put them in a dark room sometimes, and it's all very kind of Victorian Gothic situation. And I thought I was alone in the room, and I was looking, I thought, my goodness, he's got a lump in his head the same place that I've got mine, another car accident. And I just was bending over to do that, and this disembodied voice came from the background saying, "You can give him a kiss if you like." It's a bloody minister. I said, "What you want? 2 for 1? Give over." But everything with Lee was all done in such a way that knowing him it wasn't done for him. It was done to appease the ideas of what should be done for other people. And it was only when I was finishing my training at Earth Spirit, with my shamanic training, that we went through something, and I suddenly realized that this would, and I could feel him there. And I thought, he would have been here with me. He would have done this too. And that was when it came. And it was like having your soul ripped out through your throat. Stomped on and then stuffed back in again with bits fleeing out all over the shop. And that's the only way I can describe it.
There's also this element of how you should be acting. How you
they should.
How all the should, and we all know shoulds a horrible, horrible word. You should be doing this. You should be acting this way. You should be feeling this. My responsibility, how do you know how I should be feeling or acting or behaving? Right? Because it's personal. And I take my hat off to Isabel for sharing what she shared. And we did have a very good conversation afterwards. It's very, very personal, right? And the beauty of being alive is we're all unique and we deal with things in our own unique manner. And if someone is in a state of grief, just let them be in their state of grief. Not tell them, you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. Oh, no. What will people think? What will people say? Who cares? That should never actually come into the conversation.
There are elements, though, don't we think, that when people are so far in their grief, it's like they are dying too.
Oh, God, yeah.
Given up. They've given up. They are not moving from the floor. They are not eating. They are not sleeping. They are not dealing with life, even the minutiae of life. Fine for a couple of days, a week or something like that. But bills are still going to come in. If they have kids, the kids are watching this thing going on where they're disappearing in front of them. And that, again, sometimes smacks of, this is not a natural thing to happen. This is something to be afraid of. This is something that we have no control over. We don't have much control over it because, we're all going to go there. But it's something that when it comes to the deep, dark depressions that people can go into, we have to then, I feel, offer a hand to say, do you need some help with that? Do you think it might be an idea that we look at what you need for your lunch tomorrow? Because you're still alive. Yes, grieve, definitely. Feel it, be it. But don't die because of it.
You do something practical, that someone passes away, dies, and so the next door neighbour comes round with a casserole. I know you want to cook, right? Or can I cut your grass for you?
Can I take the dog for a walk? Can I put your wheelie bin out?
Yeah.
Something tangible, small but tangible, right? I've got this.
It's the little things that actually start reminding people that there is something else to do. But also the hurt and the pain, that separation, the understanding that they're never going to see that person again, or that dog or cat, or that limb, or whatever it is that is actually hurting them so badly. It's been a traumatic thing. And trauma is something that can be dealt with in many different ways. I remember, because I was very much not in the way of being compassionate at all, really, when it came to human beings, they were trying to get me to be a grief counsellor for people when they lost their pets. And in order to get out of it, I said, you know that where I come from, the only grief counselling that you get is dead, get over it.
Well,
and he said, oh, well, perhaps you wouldn't be a good fit for that. And I'm like, yes. So, but at that time, I couldn't I didn't want to deal with the owners of the animals. I was only interested in the animals because that was my hiding place.
I lost a little dog there. It was now 5 years. 5 years next month or November. I was absolutely heartbroken.
Mm.
I probably worse than when my dad had died. And I dealt with that the way I dealt with it. And then when my sister died, I dealt with that. My father-in-law died, and my uncle died, and all that stuff. But see, when that little dog died, I couldn't. I'm not ashamed to admit, I just burst into tears.
Mm.
When the vet had to do what the vet has to do, and I've got to say they were absolutely marvellous. But holding that little dog, little Yorkie, my wife and I, and when the reel went in, I was absolute bits.
Mm.
Right? And I've got videos of the dog kicking a football, not kicking a football, kind of running about with a football, things like that, and it brings back happy memories. But I still miss that wee dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought, me a big rough tough ex-copper saying I would miss that wee dog, and I still do. And I see Yorkies when I go down to the beach and train, and people are walking their dogs. I always notice when it's a Yorkie because they're marvellous wee dogs. But I was astonished at my reaction to that particular incident, thinking, well, you know what, it's only a dog, really. So we did the thing you do is when that happens is my wife and I went to the local supermarket and bought a bottle of gin. Just saying.
Toast the dog.
And some similar one, and it's strange about it because mine was a cat, no dog, a couple of years ago, and we've couldn't take it in, so I went into the vet's with her, and I knew it was going to happen. She just suddenly couldn't see, couldn't hear, right, anything. We took her in, the vets did her check, and we've got brilliant vets, and they looked after her for 17 years, so they knew her well. But the vet told me, you know what's coming, and it was crazy because I didn't realise vets can't tell someone now. They used to be, they'll say that you put the animal down.
Yeah.
We need you to say it. Do you know I couldn't say the words? I end up like Willie saying, I burst into tears. I kept saying, I don't think she's ever seen a grown guy cry the way I did that day for that cat. And the vet left the room and came back in and said, look, we need you to say it. We can't go ahead unless you say it. I had to step out, calm myself up, then come back in again and say it. And then they would even let me stay. The first injection, we're not allowed for the settings. I had to leave the room, and I felt that really difficult. And it was strange because I couldn't believe it either. How can I can't bear? Yeah, the vitamin don't allow.
That's an individual protocol.
Sedative, yeah. The other one,
that's their individual protocol. We always like for the owners to be there because the dog or cat or whatever is going to be more relaxed knowing that their owner is there.
Leslie, they do 2 injections now. Yeah, the first one puts them in the sedative, puts them to sleep. You're allowed for that. The second one is the terminal one. They don't let you in the room for that one. They do.
I was with my cat.
Those must be the veterinary. So they've been there for those 2.
That's going to be an individual, a personal protocol for that practice.
Yeah.
But what got me is the fact that you having to say it, and that was what hit me more than anything. The fact is not when losing them got probably bad enough, but it was the fact that I couldn't even say, I need you to do this. And it from you there is that when you say about the words, I thought it was a male thing maybe then, because they must be used to doing this all the time. I found it really hard just to say something like that. And I went, is it a male thing or somewhere? It was that you can't just say it. Because they said they go through this every day. I don't think she'd ever seen anybody as bad as me. I could never imagine myself being the way I was with that. And I went, it was just one of those things that happened. But that's what I mean. I think our clubs alluded to earlier. Maybe it's the way we are brought up, especially guys brought up. Because we're not told, we're told our age group anyway that we can't talk about feelings, you don't talk about emotions, you don't show them in public. And I think that's the hard bit still is to use the word death or talk about death, we need to get rid of that stigma, first of all, that people cannot, guys especially, cannot talk about it. Because a lot of them go through it and do hide a lot inside. And that's why I meant earlier, Angela, but people saying you're not grieving properly, because they're expecting to see certain reactions, and I didn't react that way. And weird as me, I did it with a cat, not with a person. And yet, that's what I'd say to them, is that there is no definitive one. There is no proper way to grieve. Every single person is different with it. But I think it is, I know West of Scotland thing or whatever, I keep saying, but guys are brought that way. And we need to change that. We need to get guys to open up more, to talk about feelings more. And that way, you wouldn't lose so many guys as well with suicide because of the grief with things. It can affect them that way as well because they can't open up.
There's also that extra piece there, Tony, as well, that everybody's different in how they grieve, but every grief is different. Everything
it,
you've
yeah.
lost is different.
Mhm.
So Willie, you mentioned a number of different instances there of different losses in your life, and each one had a different grief response.
Yeah.
And Leslie, you're talking about the ones that are collapsed on the floor and they can't do anything. To then say to them, what do you need? They haven't got a blooming clue.
Yep.
So absolutely offer to put their willy bins out, offer to give them things. They can always say no, but that's easier than saying, what do you want? What casserole will I make for you? Don't give them choices like that. If they're really in that bad state, it's an offer, yes or no.
Just do it. I had a friend that did turn up with food for us, her and her 3 kids, and it was really quite interesting. Our kids are absolutely phenomenal. And one of our daughters was asking me questions about Ben's death, and I was more than happy to answer them. I would say the mum felt a bit more uncomfortable with that. But I thought
Kids are more
that's
curious,
great.
aren't they? They're still
Yes.
wanting to know.
And asked appropriate questions. But I'm just going to throw this in here. So after Ben died, I discovered it was on Facebook, and it was a page called Refuge in Grief, and it was created by this author called Megan Devine, who wrote this book called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. You probably can't read the little writing. It's Meeting Grief and Loss in a Culture That Doesn't Understand. This became and still is my Bible. And she also created this. It's called How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed, and it's a journal for grief. And you go through it, and you can just dip into bits, choose what you want to do about journaling. And that was my absolute go-to. So I'll leave that there with you.
There are, like I was saying earlier about the Indian culture, we were in Nepal and we got to see a cremation at one of the temples during the Naga season. And it was interesting because it was the men who were washing the bodies, who were of their family members. It wasn't some undertaker that had taken them away to a little place where nobody could see them and prepped them and embalmed them and did the whole thing. This was watching this ceremony, this protocol,
ritual,
where they actually were present in the moment and actually looking at, because there's a thing that they do in the Book of the Dead, it talks about it. There are certain procedures that are made to make sure that the soul has actually left the body. And little tapers are put in between their toes and between their lips and lit. And if there's any chance that there's anybody in there still, then something will happen. But this is a way to prove before they put them on the fire that they are actually have left their body. And then to see these men with these bamboo ladders, big stretcher ladders, with it on their backs and on their shoulders, and carrying them to the fire. This was an absolute privilege to see. Just down the river from where this was happening, there was a nun bathing herself in the same water. And it was like, there's your cycle of life. There's the whole thing happening in front of you.
It's interesting
And it was
on that one. It's in the UK, obviously that doesn't happen. But my parents were at my mum went to 3 funerals in the space of a week. It was not a good week. But it was I think that was the middle one. She went, and it was what they commented on is, as the body goes in through the curtains at the crematorium, the family then go through the other side to watch the body going into the flames.
Really?
So it's part of the protocol. So while it might seem this big wonderful thing to watch in the wild, I don't feel as if it's quite as
not
to watch in the UK.
Well, no, but we never did that. I've never done that. We've never been allowed to do that. Once the curtains are shut, that's it. You get the next thing you see is the urn.
You can't ask. You can't ask the crematorium to do that.
It depends on the culture. So that particular thing was a cultural thing. So that was a religious part of the process. So as you're saying, watching to make sure it's
Yeah. I mean,
what it is.
to me, it was the personalization of it. It was the fact that it was being done with love and with attention and with respect, and that was given. And I think that basically what we really need to talk about with grief is that we do it with respect and love and attention. And so we're going to leave it there. And if there's anything that anybody wants to talk about or would like to ask questions about, then use the comments and we'll get back to you. But thank you very much for listening in and watching. And if there's anything else you'd like to know, our links are going to be in the information.